All right, so we're back, and today we're diving deep into a letter that, well, it's a letter from a resident of Baltimore's Station East neighborhood.
Okay.
It's Nicholas Miles,
Right.
and he wrote to Councilman John Bullock back on August 27th, 2019.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah,
I thought-
it's full of these accusations against HEBCAC,
Yeah.
which is a big nonprofit developer,
Right. Big player.
and their for-profit arm,
Okay.
ESD 28 LLC.
ESD.
Yeah, and Miles is claiming
Yeah.
that they were targeting Black first-time home buyers,
Mm.
and especially single women.
Oh, wow.
And things get really
Yeah.
kind of murky with this thing called the Maryland Historical Trust Homeowner Tax Credit, or MHT tax credit for short.
Yeah. The MHT tax credit is designed to make homes more affordable
Right.
by, reducing the costs for developers who are then supposed to pass those savings on to the home buyers.
Right.
And, HEBCAC was working with both the city of Baltimore and Johns Hopkins University on this Station East project,
Oh, wow.
all meant to revitalize East Baltimore.
Revitalize, right?
But Miles alleges that those promised discounts never actually happened.
Well, and you can really hear the alarm bells going off in this letter.
Yeah.
When he talks about his historic tax credit agreement,
Right.
he points to the actual language in that document
Oh, wow.
that completely contradicts what he says happened.
That makes you wonder,
Right.
where did that money go
Yeah.
if those discounts weren't passed on?
Exactly.
Miles is alleging that Edward Sabatino and Jeff Thompson,
Okay.
the guys running HEBC and ESD 28 LLC,
Okay.
actually inflated their expenses on those applications for the tax credits.
And he doesn't just kind of throw these accusations out there.
Right.
He gives really specific examples.
Like what?
Like, one property was charged $4,500 for a basement entrance and exit.
Okay.
But get this, there wasn't even a basement entrance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then there's this example of kitchen appliances
Okay.
for one of the homes. Paperwork shows $5,884, but the actual Home Depot receipt shows only $5,445.76.
Wow. So these small discrepancies
Yeah.
across multiple homes
Right?
could add up to a much bigger problem
Absolutely.
and really raises the question of whether HEBCAC was getting way more in tax credits than they should have.
And could that even be considered fraud?
Potentially. Yeah. I mean, if it's true, there could be legal ramifications.
Wow.
Sadly, this kind of thing isn't that uncommon in the development world.
Really?
Oversight can be lax, especially when you have organizations with intertwined leadership like we see here.
And it's not just the money, though.
Right.
Miles talks about this mediation back in February 2019
Okay.
with Sabatino and 4 other neighbors.
Right.
They were trying to bring up concerns about structural problems with their homes.
Oh, wow.
And they even brought in home inspection reports.
Oh, no.
Yeah, can you imagine thinking you're buying a beautiful new home,
Right? Yeah.
only to find out that there are serious structural issues?
Yeah. That's got to be heartbreaking.
It really is. And the emotional impact on those residents must have been just enormous.
Just, yeah, a real sense of betrayal
Yeah,
on top of the financial burden.
of course.
And apparently Sabatino just kind of brushed off their concerns during this mediation.
Really?
And then he turns around and sues those 4 residents.
You've got to be kidding.
Yeah.
What was he suing them for?
Well, his lawsuit claimed that HEBCAC and ESD 28 LLC actually made the properties more affordable,
Oh my gosh.
which of course directly contradicts everything the residents were saying.
Right.
But here's where it gets interesting. When the HEBCAC board heard about this lawsuit, they dismissed it immediately.
Oh, wow.
It seems like even within the organization, people were questioning how this whole situation was being handled.
So we have alleged financial shenanigans.
Right.
Homes with hidden problems.
Right.
And a lawsuit that vanishes just as quickly as it appears.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder,
Yeah.
who is HEBCAC actually looking out for here?
Right. And Miles argues that they were deliberately targeting Black first-time homebuyers. Wow.
Especially single women.
Oh, my God.
And that raises some really serious concerns about potential violations of the Fair Housing Act.
Absolutely.
You know, if this is true,
Yeah.
we're not just talking about cutting corners.
Right.
This is discriminatory practices.
And remember those marketing materials.
Yeah.
Touting these high-quality, high-performance homes.
Right, the ones focused on energy efficiency, cost savings, and comfort.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If Miles is right,
Yeah.
that was far from the reality.
Miles estimates those 5 families alone
Yeah.
are facing a combined $470,000 in repairs.
That's unbelievable.
That's a crushing amount of money for anybody,
Right.
let alone first-time home buyers who are promised affordability.
It's just heartbreaking. And, HEBCAC board initially agreed to pay for the repairs but never did.
Wow.
So these folks are stuck with damaged homes and no way to pay for the repairs.
It's a terrible situation.
And then there's the allegation of misuse of public funds.
Miles believes that ESD 28 LLC was using HEBCAC's nonprofit status to essentially get public money,
Right.
meant for affordable housing.
Right, but then using it for their own profit.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And the numbers in his letter
Yeah.
are just staggering.
What are we talking about?
So the city sold 31 homes to ESD 28 LLC for a total of, get this, $31,000.
$31,000 for 31 homes.
Yes, $1,000 a house.
Wow.
And now those same homes are selling for at least $240,000 each.
So we're talking about a massive profit margin.
Miles estimates their profit before even taking the tax credits into account at over $1.4 million.
Wow. That's a lot of money.
And it gets even more questionable when you consider that HEBC charged ESD 28 LLC $30,000 per house
Okay.
in development fees.
Oh, wow. And since Sabatino was heading up both of those organizations,
Exactly.
he was basically paying himself.
It really does seem that way.
It's pretty shady.
Yeah, and HEBCAC also used money for the Baltimore Regional Neighborhood Initiative for Station East.
Right. Those funds are specifically designated for revitalizing neighborhoods.
Exactly. And Miles argues that using those resources for Station East took away from other vital needs in the community.
So it raises these questions
Yeah.
about how responsibly HEBCAC was managing these public funds.
Right. Were they really benefiting the community or just themselves?
It's hard to say for sure without a deeper investigation.
And then, as if all of this wasn't enough, comes the issue of undisclosed lease.
What are we talking about here?
Miles discovered that ADC-BSAC and ESD 28 LLC used properties in Station East,
Okay.
including his own, as collateral for a loan,
Oh, wow.
and the title company, Residential Title,
Right.
didn't tell any of the homeowners about these leases.
So these homeowners had no idea about these additional financial obligations tied to their homes.
Exactly, which put them at huge financial risk.
This is a real mess.
So we have accusations of financial misconduct,
Yeah.
potential targeting of vulnerable homebuyers,
All right.
and possible cover-ups.
Wow.
It's a tangled web, for sure,
It really is.
and we need to start unraveling it.
Absolutely.
So what are the legal and ethical implications of all of these accusations?
Well, we've already talked about some of them.
Right.
Potential violations of the Fair Housing Act.
Yeah.
Possible fraud related to those inflated expenses.
Oh, yeah.
And the question of whether or not public funds were used appropriately.
Right.
And then there's this potential conflict of interest.
Of course.
With Sabatino holding leadership roles in both HEBCAC and ESD 28 LLC.
Yeah, and even if some of these things weren't technically illegal,
Right.
they raise some serious questions about the ethics of a nonprofit organization.
Of course, especially one that's entrusted with public money.
Right.
And responsible for providing affordable housing.
Absolutely.
So what kind of consequences could HEBCAC and ESD 28 LLC face if these accusations are proven to be true?
Well, we could be talking about lawsuits,
Right.
fines,
Mm-hmm.
loss of funding,
Definitely.
and irreparable damage to their reputation.
Yeah, that's a tough one to come back from. They might even face leadership changes or a complete restructuring of the organization.
It's possible.
Yeah.
And then what about the impact on those who bought homes in Station East
Yeah.
and the community as a whole?
Well, this whole situation could have a chilling effect
Yeah,
on affordable housing development in Baltimore.
of course.
If people lose faith in the organizations that are supposed to be creating these housing opportunities,
Yeah.
it's going to be really hard to address the city's housing needs.
Absolutely.
And of course, the residents of Station East are the ones who've been most directly harmed.
Of course, yeah.
They're left with financial burdens, emotional stress,
Right.
and that sense of betrayal we talked about.
It's a stark reminder that even initiatives with good intentions can go off the rails.
Yeah.
And that oversight and accountability are absolutely crucial.
They're essential.
But we also need to look at the bigger picture here.
Okay.
This case raises some really fundamental questions
Like what?
about how we balance the revitalization of communities
Right.
with protecting the people who actually live there.
Yeah. How do we ensure that affordable housing initiatives really help the people they're designed to help and not just the developers?
These are questions that go way beyond just one neighborhood in Baltimore. They do. And they deserve all of our attention.
Absolutely.
Now,
Yeah.
one thing that really stood out to me
Right.
was the role of Johns Hopkins University.
Mm.
They were partners in this development,
Right.
but they're kind of missing from this whole story.
Yeah, they're a bit of a ghost.
What do we know about their involvement
Yeah.
and their response to these allegations?
Unfortunately, the letter doesn't really shed much light on Johns Hopkins' specific role.
Oh, okay.
We know that they were part of that Station East partnership,
Right.
but their day-to-day involvement in their decision-making process isn't clear.
It's definitely something that we need to investigate further.
I agree.
Johns Hopkins is a major player in Baltimore, and they have a huge stake in how the city develops.
I'd be really interested to understand their perspective on these allegations.
Me too.
And, what steps, if any, they've taken to address them.
It raises these broader questions, too, about the responsibility of big institutions when they get involved with community organizations.
Do they have a duty to make sure their partners are operating ethically and responsibly?
Right.
How do they balance their own interests with the needs of the community?
It's complicated.
These are tough questions.
Yes, they are. But we need to find the answers.
Absolutely.
We might not have all the answers right now,
Yeah.
but at least we have a starting point.
Yeah, this letter's a great start.
Nicholas Miles' letter has opened the door to these issues.
It has.
It's brought to light potential wrongdoing and made us ask some really tough but important questions.
Absolutely.
And it's up to all of us to keep this conversation going,
Right.
to demand accountability, and to work towards a system that's fair and equitable for everyone. Now, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about the finances of all of this.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about those inflated expenses and the misuse of funds, right?
Right.
The letter also mentions a few other financial players.
Like who?
Like Healthy Planet LLC and Edgemont Builders.
Oh, right.
So tell me, how do they fit into this whole story?
Okay, so Healthy Planet LLC is the company that HEBCAC and ESD 28 LLC borrowed money from.
Right.
Remember, using those Station East properties as collateral.
Oh, that's right.
And the letter says that Healthy Planet LLC is owned by Winstead Rouse.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then there's Edgemont Builders.
Right.
Which also went by the name Two Bulls Construction.
Uh-huh.
And they were the ones actually doing the renovations on the Station East homes.
Right, the construction company.
It's fascinating that Miles actually included a whole list of every single business and individual involved in this
I know, right?
at the end of his letter.
It's like he's handing Councilman Bullock a roadmap for a massive investigation.
It really is.
He's saying, look, don't just scrutinize HEBCAC and ESD 28 LLC.
Yeah.
Look at everybody connected to them.
Makes you wonder if there's this whole network
Right.
of people and companies that were benefiting from this.
Could be a whole web of corruption.
Yeah, with all these players involved in exploiting public funds and vulnerable homeowners.
That's why it's so important to follow the money.
Absolutely.
We got to untangle these financial relationships between all these different players.
Yeah.
Figure out where the money came from and where it ended up.
Yeah, maybe a thorough investigation will uncover a whole pattern of behavior that goes beyond just a few bad actors.
Exactly.
And that's where you need those forensic accountants and investigators.
Oh, yeah, they're the experts.
Right. They can really dive into those financial records.
Analyze every transaction.
Yes. Track every dollar and expose those hidden connections.
Yeah, the ones that aren't so obvious at first glance.
It's like putting together a giant puzzle.
It is.
Each transaction, each business relationship is another piece of the puzzle.
And the more pieces we can put together,
the clearer the picture becomes.
Exactly.
And maybe that clearer picture will show us a much wider network of individuals and organizations involved in this scheme.
It's possible.
It could even expose flaws in the system.
Yeah.
You know, how we fund and oversee affordable housing projects.
Right.
And maybe that could lead to reforms
Hopefully.
that could prevent this from happening again.
That's the goal.
But we have to remember, we're just looking at the tip of the iceberg right now.
We are.
Everything we know is coming from Nicholas Miles's letter.
That's our starting point.
Which, while it's super detailed and compelling,
it is
just one perspective.
Right.
A complete investigation would need to gather evidence from all kinds of sources.
Like what?
Financial records, interviews.
Of course.
And maybe even legal proceedings.
Yeah, if necessary.
We have to approach this with fairness and objectivity.
Right.
We're not here to make judgments or jump to conclusions.
No, we need to let the facts speak for themselves.
Our goal is to present the facts as we know them.
Right.
Analyze what they could mean, and encourage a thoughtful and informed discussion.
Yeah, that's what we're all about.
About these really crucial issues.
I think that's a great place to leave things for today.
Okay, great. But
before we go, I do want to mention one more thing. We've talked a lot about the financial implications of this case and the legal aspects. But it's so important to remember the human cost.
Oh, absolutely.
This has been a traumatic experience for the Station East residents.
Yeah.
They've been betrayed by an organization they trusted.
Yeah, it's really sad.
And they're left with homes that need major repairs.
And they're facing so much uncertainty.
Right. We can't forget about that.
Absolutely. We have to acknowledge the emotional toll this has taken on them.
Yeah.
It's not just about money and buildings.
It's about people's lives, their dreams, their sense of security, and their community.
Well said.
We need to approach this situation with empathy and compassion.
I completely agree.
These residents deserve our support.
Yes, they do.
And they deserve justice.
Absolutely.
It's amazing, isn't it, how this whole situation just highlights a bigger issue.
What do you mean?
Well, we get so focused on the details of this case, but zoom out for a second.
Okay.
Baltimore, like so many cities, has been grappling with affordable housing.
Right.
And how to revitalize neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Without pushing out the people who already live there.
Right. And that's a tough balance.
It is.
You want to bring in investment, but you don't want to displace longtime residents.
Exactly. And you don't want to exploit them either.
And that's where these nonprofits like HEBCAC are supposed to come in, right?
Exactly.
They're supposed to be that bridge.
The advocates.
Yeah, between the community and the developers.
Right.
Making sure that everyone benefits.
That these projects aren't just for the wealthy.
Right. Right. And that's why these allegations against HEBCAC are so concerning.
It really shakes things up.
Yeah. If the organizations that are supposed to be fighting for affordable housing are engaging in these kinds of practices.
It makes you question the whole system.
It does.
People start to wonder if these initiatives can actually deliver on their promises.
And that brings us back to Nicholas Miles.
Right.
He wasn't just sitting back and watching all of this happen.
He took action.
He did his research.
Yeah.
He rallied his neighbors.
He reached out to Councilman Bullock.
Yeah. And he demanded accountability.
He wanted a public hearing.
Exactly. And his letter is a perfect example of citizen advocacy in action.
Absolutely.
He didn't just complain.
Right.
He laid out his case.
Methodically.
Yeah, all those specific examples, the financial figures.
All the evidence.
He was pushing for transparency.
And for justice.
It's really inspiring.
It is.
It shows that even when you're up against these massive institutions, one person can make a difference.
Absolutely. One voice can be enough to start a movement.
And his courage to speak out might be what ignites a real conversation.
I hope so.
About ethical development practices.
And how we protect vulnerable homeowners.
And it's not just about individual action either.
Right.
We need systemic change too.
Absolutely.
Stronger regulations.
Yeah.
Better oversight.
More community involvement in these development projects.
Exactly. We need to make sure this doesn't happen again.
We need to make ethical behavior the norm, not the exception.
And that developers are held accountable.
And that communities have a real say in what happens in their own neighborhoods.
Okay, so back to Station East.
Okay.
There's this one thing that I can't stop thinking about.
What's that?
The role of Johns Hopkins.
Oh, right.
They were partners in this whole project.
They were part of the team.
But they've been strangely silent.
It's almost like they're trying to stay out of the spotlight.
What do we actually know about what they did?
Honestly, not much.
You'd think their involvement would be more clear.
You would, but Miles' letter doesn't really shed any light on their day-to-day role.
So we know they were part of the Station East partnership.
Right.
But we don't know the extent of their involvement.
We don't know what decisions they were making.
We don't know how much they knew.
We don't know how much they knew.
It was a bit of a mystery.
I think it's something that warrants further investigation.
I agree.
I mean, Johns Hopkins is a huge institution in Baltimore.
Right.
They're heavily invested in the city.
They have a lot of influence.
I'd love to hear what they have to say about all of this.
Yeah, what's their perspective on these allegations?
And have they taken any steps to address them?
It makes you wonder about the responsibility of these big institutions when they partner with community organizations.
Do they have a duty to make sure that their partners are behaving ethically?
How do they balance their own interests with the needs of the community they're supposedly serving?
These are tough questions.
Really tough.
But we need to find the answers.
We do.
We may not have all the answers right now, but we have to start somewhere.
And Nicholas Miles's letter has given us a place to begin.
It's a starting point.
He's exposed potential wrongdoing.
Yeah.
And he's made us ask these important questions.
That's the first step towards change.
It's our job to keep this conversation going.
To push for accountability.
And to work towards a system that's truly fair and equitable.
For everyone.
Now, let's go back to the money trail for a second.
Okay.
It's not just about the inflated expenses and the misuse of funds, right?
Right. There's more to it than that.
Miles' letter mentions some other financial players.
Like who?
Healthy Planet LLC and Edgemont Builders.
Oh, right. Those guys.
How do they fit into this whole thing?
All right. So Healthy Planet LLC is the company that HEBCAC and ESD 28 LLC got that loan from.
Right. Using the Station East properties as collateral.
Exactly.
And according to the letter, Healthy Planet LLC is owned by Winstead Rouse.
Right. And then you have Edgemont Builders,
who also went by the name Two Bulls Construction.
Yeah, they were the ones actually doing the renovations on the Station East homes.
What I find really interesting is that Miles included this whole list.
I know, it's like an appendix.
Of every business and every individual involved.
He's handing Councilman Bullock a roadmap.
A roadmap to a full-blown investigation.
Don't just look at EBC and ESD 28 LLC. He's saying,
look at everyone connected to them.
It makes you wonder if this goes even deeper.
Right. Is there a whole network of people and companies that were profiting from this?
It's possible, a whole web of corruption.
Exploiting public funds.
And taking advantage of vulnerable homeowners.
This is why following the money is so important.
Absolutely. We need to see where it all went.
Untangle the relationships.
See who was paying who.
Maybe a thorough investigation will reveal a pattern of behavior.
Yeah, something that goes beyond just a few bad actors.
And that's where those forensic accountants come in.
They're the experts at this.
They can dig into the financial record.
Analyze every single transaction.
Track where the money went.
And uncover those hidden connections that we might not see right away.
It's like piecing together a puzzle.
It really is.
Each transaction, each relationship is a piece.
And the more pieces we find,
the clearer the picture becomes.
Exactly.
And maybe that picture will show us a much wider network of individuals and organizations that were involved in this.
That's what we're hoping to find out.
And it could even expose flaws in the way we fund and oversee affordable housing projects.
Which could lead to much-needed reforms.
Like, we need to prevent this from happening again.
Absolutely.
But it's important to remember, we're just at the beginning.
Yeah, we're working with what we have.
We're starting with Nicholas Miles' letter.
It's a good starting point.
It's details, it's compelling.
But it's just one perspective.
We need a thorough investigation.
To get the full story.
With evidence from financial records, interviews, maybe even legal proceedings.
We need to see the whole picture.
And we have to be fair.
Absolutely.
We can't jump to conclusions.
We need to be objective.
Our goal is to present the facts.
And let the facts speak for themselves.
We want to analyze what those facts might mean.
And encourage a thoughtful discussion.
About these really important issues.
That's what we're all about.
So let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
I want to talk about the human impact to all of this.
Yeah, that's crucial.
We've talked about the finances, the legal stuff.
But what about the people who are actually affected by this?
The residents of Station East.
They've been through a lot.
They were betrayed by an organization they trusted.
They were promised one thing and got something completely different.
They're living in homes that need major repairs.
And they're facing an uncertain future.
It's heartbreaking.
It really is.
We have to remember that these are real people.
With families.
With dreams.
With hopes for the future.
They were looking for a safe, affordable place to live.
They thought they found that in Station East.
And now their sense of community has been shattered.
Their trust has been broken.
It's a devastating situation.
And we need to acknowledge the emotional toll it's taken on them.
We can't forget about the human cost of this.
This isn't just about money in buildings.
It's about people's lives.
Their sense of security.
And well-being.
We need to approach this with empathy and compassion.
These residents deserve our support.
They deserve to be heard.
They deserve justice.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to shift gears again.
Okay, where are we going now?
I want to talk about the media.
The media.
Yeah. How has this story been covered so far?
That's a good question.
Has it gotten the attention it deserves?
Sadly, these kinds of stories often get overlooked.
Especially when they involve marginalized communities.
It's easy for these issues to get lost in the constant news cycle.
Right. There's always something new happening.
But that doesn't make these stories any less important.
And that's where investigative journalism comes in.
They can dig deep and uncover the truth.
They can shine a light on these issues.
And hold those in power accountable.
A well-researched investigative piece can have a huge impact.
It can raise awareness.
Spark outrage.
And lead to real change.
It can empower communities to demand better.
And to hold their leaders accountable.
It's amazing what the power of storytelling can do.
It really is.
It reminds us that even when things seem really bleak, there are people out there fighting for what's right.
Fighting for justice.
Now, I want to touch on something we haven't really talked about yet.
What's that?
The legal ramifications.
Yeah.
What legal options do the Station East residents have?
That's a great question.
Can they hold HEBCAC and ESD 28 LLC accountable through the courts?
Well, I'm not a lawyer.
Right.
But based on the allegations in Miles's letter,
Yeah.
there are definitely some legal avenues they could explore.
Like what?
Well, they could potentially file a class action lawsuit.
Oh, wow.
Alleging violations of the Fair Housing Act.
Okay.
Fraud, breach of contract,
Uh-huh.
maybe even racketeering.
Wow, that's serious.
They could also try to get those undisclosed lineages removed from their properties and try to recover any financial losses they've suffered.
So a successful lawsuit could not only get them some financial compensation,
Right.
but it could also force HEBCAC and ESD 28 LLC to change their practices.
And to be more transparent.
And it could set a precedent for future cases.
Make other developers think twice before trying to pull something like this.
And legal action can also be a powerful tool for discovery.
Oh, absolutely.
The litigation process often involves gathering evidence,
taking depositions,
uncovering information that might not have come to light otherwise.
It's a way to get to the truth.
So that discovery process could really expose what was going on inside HEBCAC and ESD 28 LLC.
It could reveal the extent of their alleged misconduct.
And it could even expose a wider network of people and organizations who were involved.
It's possible.
But we have to acknowledge that legal action can be a long and difficult process.
It can be.
It's expensive.
And there's no guarantee of a win.
But for the Station East residents,
yeah,
it might be their best shot at getting justice.
And holding those responsible accountable.
It's a reminder that the legal system, while it's not perfect,
it has its flaws,
can be a tool for social change.
It can give a voice to the voiceless.
It can help people fight for what's right.
And it can expose wrongdoing.
But it also reminds us that justice takes time.
It's not always easy.
And sometimes you have to be willing to fight for it.
You have to stand up for what you believe in.
Now, I want to bring it back to the residents of Station East.
Okay.
We've talked about the financial burden.
The legal challenges.
But we can't forget about the emotional toll this has taken on them.
Absolutely.
They've been betrayed.
By an organization they thought they could trust.
They're left with homes that need serious repairs.
And they're facing a lot of uncertainty.
Their lives have been turned upside down.
The emotional impact of this can't be overstated.
It can lead to anger,
betrayal,
fear,
even despair.
It can strain relationships,
erode trust in institutions.
We have to acknowledge the human cost of this.
It's not just about dollars and cents.
It's about people's lives,
their dreams,
their well-being.
We need to make sure they have the support they need.
Absolutely. Counseling,
legal aid,
financial assistance,
advocacy groups.
We need to make sure their voices are heard.
Their stories need to be told.
Their experiences can't be forgotten.
They are a reminder of why ethical behavior is so important.
And why accountability matters.
And why we need to fight for systemic change.
To prevent this from happening to other communities.
That's the ultimate goal.
Okay, so as we start to wrap up this part of our deep dive, what are the key takeaways here?
Well, we've got a situation where HEBCAC, a prominent nonprofit developer, and their for-profit arm, ESD 28 LLC, are accused of some pretty serious misconduct.
Both ethical and potentially illegal.
Exactly.
And these accusations, which came to light because of Nicholas Miles.
Right, he blew the whistle.
They involve financial impropriety.
Targeting vulnerable homebuyers.
Possibly misusing public funds.
It's a mess.
And it raises questions about the responsibility of nonprofits.
And the challenges of balancing revitalization with resident protection.
And the need for transparency and accountability in affordable housing development.
We need to do better.
Absolutely. And this case also shows the importance of individual advocacy.
Nicholas Miles is a great example of that.
The power of investigative journalism.
To uncover the truth.
And the potential for legal action to bring about justice and change.
It can be a long road.
It can be, but sometimes it's the only way.
This story isn't over yet.
Not by a long shot.
But the allegations in Miles's letter have started an important conversation.
About ethical development practices.
The role of big institutions.
And the rights of vulnerable communities.
We need to keep this conversation going.
And before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about the need for systemic change.
Right.
Stronger regulations, more oversight.
But what about individual responsibility?
What can we do in our own communities to make sure the development projects are ethical?
That's a great question.
Equitable.
And that they actually benefit everyone involved.
It's not just about relying on the government or big institutions to fix things.
We all have a role to play.
We can get involved in our communities.
Attend community meetings.
Support local organizations that are working on these issues.
Ask tough questions.
Demand transparency from our leaders.
Hold them accountable.
Every action, no matter how small,
can make a difference.
We can all be part of creating a more just and equitable world.
That's a great message to end on.
You know, it's kind of wild to think this all began with one letter.
Right.
From one guy in Station East.
Yeah, just one resident.
Really shows you the power of speaking up.
Absolutely.
Of raising your voice when you see something wrong.
It can spark a whole conversation.
And maybe even lead to real change.
That's the hope.
So as we wrap up this whole deep dive into Station East,
yeah,
I want to leave you with one last thing to think about.
Oh.
We've spent a lot of time focused on HEBCAC and ESD 28 LLC.
Right, all those specific allegations.
But what if we zoom out a bit?
Okay, I like where this is going.
What does this whole case say about affordable housing in general?
The bigger picture.
Not just in Baltimore.
But all over the country.
Are the problems in Station East just like a Baltimore thing?
Right. Are they unique to HEBCAC?
Or is this a symptom of a much bigger problem?
A systemic issue.
Is this happening in other cities too?
Under the radar.
Are there other communities being exploited like this?
Tough questions.
Really tough.
But we got to ask them.
If we want real change, we got to understand the root of the problem.
Dig deep, right.
So are there these like built-in flaws in the system?
Flaws that create these opportunities for exploitation.
Especially in communities that are already struggling.
Economically, socially.
These are tough questions.
Yeah.
And there aren't easy answers.
Not at all.
But we need to talk about it.
We have to.
If we want to find solutions that actually work.
Solutions that are sustainable.
And equitable.
So where do we even begin?
Well, we need to look at the incentives, right?
What's motivating these projects?
Is it profit?
Or is it actually helping people?
We got to look at who holds the power.
Who benefits from these projects?
Who gets left behind?
And what are the unintended consequences?
When you mix profit and social good,
it can get messy.
And we got to be careful about easy fixes.
Like just saying more regulation.
Right. Because sometimes too many rules
can actually backfire.
And make it harder for good organizations to do their work.
It's about finding that balance.
Right. A system that encourages ethical behavior.
Protects communities.
And promotes development that benefits everybody.
Not just a select few.
So we need strong regulations.
Absolutely.
But we also need oversight.
Making sure those regulations are actually followed.
And we need real community engagement.
People need a voice.
They need to be part of the process.
Shaping their own neighborhoods.
We also need transparency.
No more secrets.
Accountability.
People need to be held responsible for their actions.
And we need ethical leadership.
From the top down.
It all comes down to values.
What do we as a society believe in?
Are we okay with exploiting people for profit?
Or do we believe that everyone deserves a chance to thrive?
Regardless of their income.
Their background.
Their zip code. Station East is a reminder.
A wake-up call.
That progress isn't always progress.
Sometimes it comes at a cost.
A human cost. We got to make sure the path to a better future
is one that includes everyone.
A path built on integrity,
compassion,
and justice for all.
That's the future we need to fight for.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into Station East.
It's been a long one.
It has, but it's an important one.
It's a story that needs to be told.
We hope it makes you think.
And that it inspires you to act.
We can all be part of creating a more just and equitable world.
Absolutely. It starts with each of us.
Keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep fighting for what's right.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.